All right. Thumbs up. Thumbs up from the tech side. Welcome everyone to this afternoon session. It's day 2 of the conference. We're on the last stretch of a pretty wonderful GSTC conference so far. I think you'd agree. My name is Willy Legrand. I'm a professor. I'm an author based in Germany, and I'll be assisting a pretty wonderful lineup of experts this afternoon. So thanks for being around. This is spring in Stockholm. We've heard that, so there's no better place to be here. For those who attended the session this morning on data-based innovation in tourism, I think it's fair to say that at this point, and I guess many people in this industry would agree that it's probably more important to be roughly right than precisely wrong. And we make mistakes sometimes. We take shortcuts during that data gathering process. And that leads to misleading conclusions and poor decision, and that's really you're precisely wrong. And when we look at it, and when we have this ability of being roughly right, but when we do that with high quality data, and perhaps that's a hint to the space data we've had this morning, I guess it's more beneficial, effective for making informed decision. Data is definitely important, and I think we all agree on that. But past that data gathering stage, I guess it's how we understand data and what do we do with it. So you're all sitting here very nicely in a pretty amazing building, actually. Lots of wood, so lots of hint on biophilic design. Nicely heated with geothermal heat. Your body temperature is at 37 degrees Celsius. You're all feeling good. But what if I would tell you that half of your body is in the oven and the other half is in the freezer? You still have a mean of 37, but you're not feeling so good about it. And so this is a little bit the way that we deal with data in some ways, right? Beyond just looking at means. How about standard deviation? What are the benchmarks that we're looking at, and what's the implication for our decision? And I guess this is really what this session will partly be about. There's this old saying, and you all know it, it's garbage in and garbage out. When we have inaccurate data and we use this as an input for our process, for analyzing anything that we want to analyze, then the output, of course, will be flawed and be not reliable. And we see that quite a bit in our industry. And this session is very much about that, because it is about sustainability measurement and evaluation. So that context of garbage in, garbage out, I mean, I guess that's a caution for stakeholders. I think I didn't really want to make the link again to the EU Green Claim Directive, but I almost have to. Everyone is increasingly worried. At the same time, we must ensure that data that we gather is increasingly verified, vetted, and sourced reliably. And as an academic, we're being checked on that all the time in terms of what's your methodology for data collection, what's your analysis, statistical analysis for the processing, what's your interpretation of that data, and so on. So there's this quote, and I used that quote 2 years ago in Sevilla. I want to use it again. It's everything simple is false, everything complicated, unusable. And this is a little bit, right, what we're at this point. So we have very complex system. Complexity is a problem for us because it is unusable. And whatever is too simple, that's what it is. It's just too simple. And that's where we need to untangle all of that, and that's where our experts come in. There is one question I've been asked to answer, or we've been asked to answer. I don't know if we're going to manage to answer this, and I'm not too sure if actually we need to answer this. The question was, how do we move forward as an industry in terms of common standard and sort of universal criteria? But I've just came out of a session where Sol, I don't know if you're in a room, Sol, but you're right there, thanks, where you've mentioned that one size fit all might be a problem, in fact, for this very diverse, fragmented industry, this sector, where basically it's very difficult. So the question is, what is it that we want as commonality, as in terms of criteria? What should be common to all of us, and what should be different? And so this is what partly what we're going to be doing. We're going to have a short set of presentations, just like we had this morning, from each of our panelists, and they'll set the stage and for the discussion. And I could see we have a lot of questions from the audience. I was one of them, always trying to get my questions through. So make sure you do that again. So Slido is up and running, and so don't wait to the end. Just as it goes, just enter your question. We'll pick up those questions when it's time for panel discussion. So first up, we're going to have our 4 presentations. I'll introduce each one individually. They'll come do their presentation, and we'll rotate. And at the end, we'll start the discussion. First up, she's an analyst at the Swedish Agency for Economic and Regional Growth, short Tillväxtverket. This is such a long title in English, and they've managed in Swedish to make it one word. I just don't know how you do this, but please welcome Maria Wiberg to the stage.
Thank you so much. I am here to talk to you about a Nordic project that I am the project manager of. The title for that is Measuring Regional Tourism and Tourism's Environmental Impact in the Nordics. And the Nordic countries, for you who might not be aware, are the countries of Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Iceland, Finland, and also the autonomous regions of Faroe Islands and Greenland, and the autonomous region of Åland. So that's what I'm referring to when I'm talking about this model. The project itself, it's based into two work projects, where the first project is about the regional breakdown, and the second work project is the environmental side of the project. But before I go into discussing that more, I will just put up the brief definition from UNWTO about tourism. This is for me what I'm talking about. I am working in the statistical world. I need frameworks to build around everything that we measure. So tourism is a social, cultural, and economic phenomenon which entails the movement of people to countries or places outside their usual environment for personal or business professional purposes. And I've underlined usual environment here because in our project, in our model that we build up, this is of great importance. So, the project we're running on regional tourism, we are using transactional data to break down national numbers into regional and municipal level. This is a new data that we've been missing, and we get more precise granularity that we didn't think was possible. And it's also something where we, as the statistician, can control what is defined as tourism, rather than the tourists themselves answering surveys where they define themselves what is tourist consumption. We do this from a consumption perspective. So what are actual consumption that the tourists spend when they are traveling? We are using card data from Visa and MasterCard, amongst others. And we have short delivery time for the data, so we can get more precise data just in time. And in the longer term, we are also looking at a lower cost than doing extensive surveys. At least it's been true in the Swedish case, which has been a pilot in this project. And we can also see that we have higher consumption in certain product groups than we have when we look at surveys, because people tend to underestimate their spending when they're answering surveys. How much spending did you do last month when you were traveling to this country? Maybe you forgot about the cafe you went into and took a coffee while en route to somewhere else. When we're following the card data, we can see your actual spend. The model, this is going to be so much fun. I'm having an equation here for you to look at. Because I'm a statistician, and this is where I come from. This is the model that we set up. It's fairly easy. We're looking at consumption in different product groups. Consumption as a total is enumerated from different parts. And in Sweden or the Nordic countries, transaction or card payments are very, very frequent. We don't use a lot of cash in Sweden, and that's true for the other Nordic countries as well. So we have estimated, and this is different depending on what product groups we're talking about, but we've estimated that about 95% of the spend is done by Visa and MasterCard cards. We also, so these are the two main collaborators in this project, but we've also another company that we buy data from, which is called Nets. They're an acquirer, the actual place where you place your card. And then from them we bought data insights. So how much of the card that is actually used in their machines are Visa and MasterCard, and how much of a percentage is other types of cards, like diners or American Express, and so on. So we also get insights from them into the total amount that is from Visa and MasterCard. So we can enumerate those data by the amounts. And like I said, it's different from different product groups. We have also in Sweden gone over to using more P2P payments or peer-to-peer payments. In Sweden, Swish is fairly common. The most common international one is PayPal. And we enumerate for that. We also get insights from that. And then we add cash payments also, which is something that is difficult to measure, but we do approximations to add that on. And then also, since this is a breakdown for consumption group, we also have certain product that adds from the travel agencies. So flights, for example, you have that included in your travel agency expenditure, but we moved that to the actual flight product because that's where we want it. Looking at the model that we've constructed with Visa and MasterCard, we'll look at where the majority of your spend is made. If it is within a municipality, then that is counted as your home municipality. But you can also have a working municipality where your majority of spend is what you do between 9 to 5. That's your work environment. All of this is not counted as tourism. That's defining your usual environment. With Visa, we've set up the work two environments, but with MasterCard you can have more than two, where you have the majority of your spend is within one municipality, but you can also have where you do a majority of trips, or trips of a certain number of days. That is also included in your usual environment. When you do spend in other municipalities or regions, that is tourism in our model. And we get data from Visa and MasterCard on both municipal level, but also on regional level. So we will be able to publish data on both regional and municipal breakdown. And if I move over to the second part of the project, it's looking at the environmental impact. And then we combine TSA, Tourism Satellite Account, with System of Environmental Economic Accounting to calculate what the tourism effect is, the environmental effect from tourism. The first part, we have 2 pilot countries in this project, so we have done it for Finland and Denmark. Both countries will look at the direct effects of GHG emission generated by production of goods and services consumed by tourism. And then in the second part, we've also, for Denmark, looked at the indirect effects as well, which is also looking at imports and exports and international flights. So that is a wider picture, and we're doing this by combining it with input-output tables. So we'll look at the actual input that you have while consuming something. And that kind of gives us this image where you have the direct emissions while looking at TSA and SCEA, and then you have the carbon footprint where you also incorporate input-output tables. And that was me. Thank you so much.
Round of applause to Mara. Thank you so much. See you in a minute.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Is my mic on? Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you so much. Next on stage, he is the general manager of MINDHAUS, and that's an agency offering tourism marketing strategy services. So please let's welcome Theofilos Kyratsoulis to the stage. Theofilos, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Willy. I'm delighted to attend my first GSTC conference. So I would like to extend a great thank to GSTC, to Visit Sweden, as well as the city of Stockholm. And I'm delighted to speak at a full house. Before we start, I want to make a personal confession. I did my master's degree in environmental governance back in 1997. But then I shifted slowly but steadily towards strategy and marketing. I know nobody's perfect. Maybe some of you are wondering what a marketing and strategy agency has to do in this session. And I think we are here for two reasons. The one is that we are seeing the traveler and the consumer as part of the solution and not as part of the problem. And to be frank, listening to all the sessions during today, very interesting sessions, and yesterday, I really missed the traveler perspective and to a certain extent. The other reason is when we report sustainability, I think travelers and our visitors are part of our audience. So these are the two reasons why I'm here, and I feel I'm adding value, and what I want to say is interesting for you guys. So I will be presenting very briefly 3 insights from the work we do for the European Travel Commission. One has to do with monitoring European travel sentiment. This is an assignment we have been doing since the start of the pandemic. So every 3 months, the European Travel Commission releases consumer insights forecast for the next 6 months. That's one. And the other assignment we concluded about 2 months ago was a market study, a members only for ETC, regarding balancing long-haul travel to Europe and sustainability. So I get special permission to show you some charts for ETC. So thank you, ETC, very much for giving me the approval. So one insight I want to share, and I think it's really interesting when we are measuring either as service providers and as places and brands, sustainability is that travelers are equally interested in all 4 pillars of sustainability. Usually it was mentioned yesterday that, let's say, the carbon emissions and the greenhouse gas emissions are the first thing we are trying to measure, but there are so many aspects and so many KPIs of sustainability. So when we are talking about travelers and when we are thinking that we should address this audience as well, this is a very important key takeaway from you guys, that whether we're talking about the natural environment, whether we're talking about local communities and local economies, especially travelers are interested equally in all 4 pillars. So for me, this is something that we need to take account in the path that the opening session we discussed today, how we form KPIs, what kind of KPIs we develop. A second insight I would like to present is that still there is, this is the notorious value action or say-do gap between the travelers and our guests. And there is a huge debate between them because I personally feel that travelers are giving to destinations and also to the private sector the most valuable asset they have, their time. So I don't believe that travelers, when they go to a place, they, let's say, mindfully want to harm it. So I think education is key, but also I think it's really important of understanding where are the challenges. So from research we did 3 years ago among European markets this time, there was a huge gap between willingness to pay regarding trimming the carbon footprint, on the contrary, local communities. And I think that's what a good marketing has to offer, that we need to offer some hooks for our guests and for travelers to onboard them in this very complex journey, because sustainability is even a complex, let's say, concept for us, who are experts, let alone the guests and the travelers. So in this slide, I'm showing, let's say, the percentages among 10 European markets that travel within Europe and how willing they would be to pay more to, let's say, trim their footprint. And we see that's a great controversy. In this slide, we are seeing more support towards local communities. And I think this is a very good entry point through product development, which is also marketing. Marketing is not only communications, to onboard in this very challenging way our guests. So still there are so many, let's say, concern among guests and consumers and travel consumers about what is sustainability. I talked about that 10 seconds ago. It's even complex for us, but let alone them. So there is a great still percentage that they do not understand. They have a very vague understanding of what a sustainable option is, what means to travel responsibly. Not only that it's quite expensive, for better or for worse, which is not always the case, but also I'm not sure what I have to do in order to minimize, let's say, my impacts or add value to the place and to the service providers. So this is really interesting. It's one of the first times I've seen measuring consumer awareness in respect to environmental and sustainability labels. And what is interesting is that they're definitely overlooked and they are neglected. I'm looking forward to Kate's presentation later about how Booking is handling third-party certification. But this is a quite interesting finding that really travelers are overlooking and neglecting certificates, which is a very solid way of reporting throughout their traveler journey. So whether you are booking, whether you are a destination, whether you are a tour operator or travel agency, or whether you are an accommodation provider, travelers and consumers have a very little recall of whether it was a label in place, and let alone when we ask them what kind of label, to name one label they remember, the figures were even more dire. So I think, and I understand that following the previous sessions, that labels and standards are used for destinations to work with the private sector, but I think this is a pain point that is the elephant in the room we need to address. And I think this is the added value that GSTC can have in the future. So I'm wrapping up a presentation, not with, let's say, in a very assertive way. So I'll come back to what ancient Greeks were doing, asking questions. So I think the best thing is to ask the proper question than having a proper answer. So we gathered 3 questions, and I think, Willy, we will be probably discussing more during our, when we finish all the presentation, is who will be leading to internalize our environmental costs into our tourism product offering. And we have, let's say, a game with words, propose. So are we proposing to our guests? Are we proposing our service providers and our destinations to our guests? Or are we imposing? And I think this is a very interesting discussion depending on what kind of pillar of sustainability it's really important and what we are measuring. Another question, and I think this is a bit rhetoric in my side, is it really important to measure social KPIs along with environmental ones? All the focus, and rightly so, has to be in greenhouse gas emissions, climate crisis and existential crisis. But I think this, we need to accelerate in finding KPIs and actually measuring them, even if there are a handful to start with. And last but not least, because we are seeing a very fragmented regarding environment, regarding environmental labels and sustainability labels, should we move? Should we use the standards and the labels for us to work better and move towards sustainability fact labels. And how? So that's my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention, and looking forward to a very vivid discussion later.
Thank you very much, Theofilos.
Thank you.
Okay, so 2 takes on consumer behavior, one on intention, expectations, etc., and one on actual consumption. So quite interesting. Let's move to next on stage. He is the Chief Operating Officer at EasyJet Holidays, a well-established tour operator, of course. Please welcome Matt Callahan to the stage. Matt.
So there is plenty of data, I think, in our industry. Plenty of things for us to think about and to reflect upon. But is there too much data? We sometimes might have a look at what is the source of the data and think, it must be credible, or, ooh, not quite sure. Do we trust the data that's put before us? Do we, as sustainability tourism professionals, trust data that is put before us? What about the customers, consumers, partners, destinations, all of those others in our wonderful ecosystem of travel and tourism? Where do they stand on some of this data? As an industry, if we're honest, are we where we want to be, or increasingly where we need to be when it comes to all things data, measurement, reporting? So my name is Matt Callahan. I'm very proud to be the Chief Operating Officer of EasyJet Holidays. For context, whilst Willy said we are well established, we took an interesting decision with hindsight to launch our business at the end of 2019. A somewhat interesting time to launch a new holiday business, but we now take over 2 million customers a year on holiday, package holidays, so flights plus accommodation plus other things at the customer's choice across Europe and slightly further afield. We believe that tourism can be an incredible power for good. But we also know that there is much, much more that we could, should, and increasingly must be doing across the environment, across socio-cultural, across economic domains, to make sure that the industry that we have been part of, many of us, for so long, is something that our children and generations to come can still be incredibly proud of. How do we make sure that we continue to bring new talent and attract new people to work in our industry so that we can continue the global force for good? So we at EasyJet Holidays want our customers to be able to holiday better. We want tomorrow's holidays to be better than today's, and we choose our words carefully because this, with the unfortunate pun, is a journey that we are all on. It would be easy to set futile targets and say, we want to be the greenest, the best. But as we might discuss later, those sorts of wild ambitions can also come back to haunt us very quickly. So we want to holiday better across both the city destinations that we offer holidays to, as well as traditional beach destinations. So how do we do that? At EasyJet Holidays, there are 3 principal ways that we are looking to try and make it easier for our customers to holiday better. First of all, how do we create better holiday choices? How do we take everything that we know and share it with our customers to enable them to make better holiday choices for themselves? There are reports after reports after reports, and we've done our research, and like many people will have seen or read or done their own, all of this. Customers want more. Customers want to make it easy to do more things, blah, 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 blah. And then we also have this huge problem that there's the thing that customers say and then there's the thing that customers do. Provocation, is that partly because of the way we talk about things? Is that partly because we bamboozle with different data? Here's a big stat, and then there's 3 asterisks with footnotes underneath. You have to zoom in to understand, well, what are the caveats here? And you know what? We've lost nearly all of the people that we need to be bringing in, or the consumers and partners that we want to bring in to be on this journey to make sure that tomorrow's holidays are better, more positively, more impactful than today's. Secondly, how do we keep our holidays special? So, people go on holiday to have a great time. Nobody chooses to go on holiday for it to be rubbish. And the difference between a great holiday and a not-so-great holiday, those that we remember for being the most incredible experiences, I put it to you, are down to the people and the places. They are the things that make our holiday memories so special. So how do we, as one of the UK's and now Europe's biggest holiday companies, how do we take it as our responsibility to make sure that we are giving back to the communities, to the people and the places that are giving to our customers such incredible holiday experiences? And then thirdly, transform travel for everyone. The EasyJet brand is pretty well known across Europe and further afield. How do we make sure that we use the power of our brand to uplift the industry as a whole? And there's three things that underpin all the work that we do. Education. This is learning for all of us. We don't have the answers. We try and find answers to the problems that we commonly share. We share what we know back with communities, partners, industry colleagues. Collaboration. It's great to get together, but those of you that have heard me talk before know that I always give a health warning with collaboration, because it's always our go-to when we don't know what to do and we want to just delay something by 6 months. Oh, let's collaborate. What's the one thing that we could all get behind? Folks, the answer is nothing. Because if you think there's one thing that we're all going to get behind, we will be here in 3 years' time. We may not be here, but we're in a room similar to this in 3 years' time, saying, what's that one thing we can all get behind? Our industry is incredible, but it's incredibly diverse. So we need to think, what's right for you and your organization? Who can you find to partner with that can help your journey go even quicker? Which is the third point, rapid implementation. Get on, try things, test and learn. If it fails, share the news that it fails. Don't try this, it doesn't work. If it does work, how can we rapidly scale? This slide is not about Brexit. We still wear the scars of that when we come to places, and there's 2 queues at immigration, and then we're in the one that's got 150 people. But this is all about, it's great to have all these aspirations and noble ambitions, but the legal and regulatory environment is becoming increasingly complex. We're not going to go through all of those things again, but even just yesterday, kind of the CSR triple D, kind of about what we're going to do with our supply chains, due diligence, all the rest of it. This is getting more complex, not less complex, but that doesn't mean that we need to shy away from things. More, what is the opportunity that this creates for us? So we're proud to work with 2 key partners, GSTC, because we see hotel certification being great for consumers and creating better holiday choices, but also helping us with our legal and regulatory challenges as those paths kind of make themselves a little bit clearer as we go forward. But the other piece of work that we're very proud of is with UN Tourism. And this is how we did a pilot last year, we're now rolling out into delivery. How can we create a common framework for tourism, for the tourism sector in measurement? Even on some of those data points that I said, that I showed at the start, and these are not criticisms of those points, but how do we define a tourist? If we're looking at geographies, how do we define what is the Middle East? How do we define terms such as consumer spending? What do those things mean? Because actually, we could all go away and do our measurement, but actually, how on earth do we start to be able to communicate some of that? So for us, the 3 priorities: certification, data quality, and industry collaboration. Look forward to discussing those more with panelists, and please get onto Slido. Let's have a really rich conversation, because it's all about education, collaboration, rapid implementation. Willy, thank you.
Thank you very much, Matt. Excellent. It's all about education. It's what I've been doing for 20 years. So I still have a job. I think AI hasn't taken that away yet. Last but definitely not least, she is the Vice President of Sustainability at Booking Holdings. Please welcome Kate Heiny to the stage. Kate.
Hello. Thank you for the invitation, for the introduction, and thank you to my previous panelists. Very exciting to listen to your talks, and I know that following this we will have a lot of rich discussion. There's a lot of provocation there that I'm excited to talk about. So I'm Kate. I lead the sustainability work for Booking Holdings. So if you don't If you don't know Booking Holdings, we do own Booking.com as a popular one here, Kayak, OpenTable, Agoda, Priceline in the US, and a number of other brands. We are a rich family of travel and tourism-related brands. A lot of what we'll talk about is Booking.com, but just to realize that this is also a little bit broader. So the purpose, actually, maybe just by way of some of the other commentary that we had first. So I am new to travel and tourism, but my previous 10 years were with fashion and apparel in the sustainability space, and prior to that, consumer products. So while I might be new to the travel and tourism sector here, and we'll talk about that, I have been a part of a lot of sustainability efforts in industries that are perhaps a little bit more ahead of the curve in terms of the regulation or the bullseye on the industry for sustainability. So we can talk about that as we go through this. The purpose of Booking Holdings is making it easier for everyone to experience the world. And of course, predicated on that is that there must be a world worth experiencing. So the way that we look at this is publicly, we have two main goals. That we will be net zero by 2030 and 2040, and we will have more sustainable product offerings on our platform. The specifics are not relevant to this conversation, but those are the two areas in which we will be driving our efforts. You probably, if you did not attend the Green Claims Directive talk yesterday, may have been hearing a little bit more about these regulations as a number of conversations, I think, were kind of stoked, and the fires are being built around this area. What it means is that substantiation of claims is the name of the game. So if we claim as an organization to want to do in the future, to be a net zero organization, that is now going to be considered a claim. There are regulations in Europe, CSRD, the Green Claims Directive. There are regulations in the UK, in the US, in Singapore, in Japan. These are not a small set of regulations that are coming to bear on our industry in a way that they have not before. And substantiation of the claims and the way that we speak about things is not going away and is only building. And I can tell you from our own organization, very simply, it is complicated. It is super complicated. I loved your quote at the beginning, Willy, around what's complicated. Oh, I'm not going to get it right. The simplicity versus the difficulty and complication of information. In order to say that we are net zero in the future, just to break this down for you and kind of dive really deep into a bit of the weeds, we will need to have a roadmap. We will need to have substantiated programs in place that are certified by a third party, that have funding mapped against them that is all provable. So that is a very, that is a very significant body of work. We will no longer be able to just put in our sustainability report that we want to be net zero by 2050. That will be illegal. So we are being affected by these things. And just to break that down one step further, we use the GHG protocol, right? So it's a globally agreed upon standard. We have our scope 1, 2, and 3 of our footprint. Scope 3 is where 90% of our footprint is. That is fairly normal. 80% of that footprint is made up by 80 suppliers, so 80. So we could use a spreadsheet to track that. We could put that in 80, it could be manual. 50% of our scope 3 is made up by suppliers that report to the CDP. That's a credible third-party organization. They're really verifying that data. That is a good thing. But that means that 50% is not. So we have to start making estimates. We have to start guessing, or doing it in an educated manner, using statistics, using other tools. We have to start estimating 50% of that footprint. That's just one level. 10% of that footprint is supplied by companies or organizations that have set a science-based target. Again, the gold standard. That is another kind of standard that we can leverage, that we can have trust in, et cetera. But that means that 90% have not. You dig, you dig, you dig. This is a lot of data. It is a lot of complexity. It is a lot of levels of estimation within here. So this is something that we have to do in order to be able to make a claim that we will be net zero in the future. So we need reliable data, we need verification of that, and we need to assure the data that we are reporting. But on top of that, we will be scrutinized. We will be judged against that, we will be verified, and we will be told whether or not it's okay or legal to make that claim. So this is, this is something that is just to identify. It's no longer something that we can kind of get out front and say, this is our aspiration, without having a plan, without having it substantiated, and without having the information in place that will be able to allow us to do that. You may or may not have seen, Booking.com has worked very hard on the Travel Sustainable program over the past 3-4 years. That is a fantastic program. I think we have been industry leading in that. I'm very proud with the work that has been done. I'm very proud of our ability to be able to demonstrate to travelers who say that they want to travel more sustainably, that we have a way of aggregating a lot of disparate information and giving them milestones or kind of a trajectory for where to look for more sustainable information. That program is gone. You may or may not have read that in the news. The Dutch Consumer Authority was one of the bodies that approached us and said, that's not allowed anymore. We are actually telling you now, under the Unfair Commercial Practices Directive, you may not make that claim. You are misleading consumers. So yes, we've had a great program. Our intention has been strong. We've been putting this out with best of intentions. And in fact, the methodology, the background is strong, but we cannot communicate that way anymore. We cannot use sustainability. The leaves are gone. The levels are gone. That is no more. So if you have a leaf in your program, friendly heads up, you probably can't have that anymore. So we will be, as you've seen, we're evolving the program, and there's a lot of work in there. But we're one of the ones that are out front. We're happy to share that. We're happy to talk to you about it. But that is a driver of what is coming. So, as a provocative question, I hope, what does it mean for us? What does that mean? For us as an individual company, we have to be doing exactly what I demonstrated or hope to kind of give you a snapshot, and we need to be making very clear roadmaps that have measurable data, that have verifiable processes, repeatable, at scale, things that we can actually prove will drive the change that we want to see, change the impact that we have. As an industry, we need to come together to do that. We need to, as Matt just talked about collaboration, we need to be able to actually align on a common language to be able to demonstrate that change. And we're doing that for travelers, because our data shows that travelers want to travel more sustainably, and they will make those choices, and they want to. I know we'll get into those questions as we move into Q&A now, but that's ultimately what the goal is here. I do this work to be able to improve the businesses and the companies that I work for and make them more sustainable for the future and for the industry. And it's because people want to make those choices. Our travelers are asking to do that, so we need to be able to provide them the opportunity to do so. That's it for me. I think I'll hand it back over to Willy.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Kate. Great, we don't need that. Take a seat wherever you want. And I'd like to please ask all the speakers to come on stage as we take our spot, and we'll try to juggle the questions that I have and that the audience have, and we have a lot of questions for sure. And I'm keeping track a little bit. So let's just do a quick round of questions from me, and then we'll go straight into the many questions from our audience, and I think the questions are going to show up on the screen behind in front of us. Theofilos, tell us a little bit. I'll start with a question which I don't know if it's a tough question or not, but you've mandated to work with the European Travel Commission, but in that mandate, it wasn't about developing KPIs. You were just highlighting the existing one. What's your take on measuring the hard-to-quantify social aspects of sustainable travel? And in any case, are we doing a good job at it?
Thank you, Willy. I think there is a great deal of work being done for environmental KPIs. I think the challenge is as we try to address, because we are talking about travelers, but there is no one traveler. I mean, there are different personas, there are different markets. So from the environmental KPIs perspective, our challenge, especially when we were probing the long-haul markets, and there is a long discussion, long-haul travel to Europe regarding the emissions, there was a hard time in distinguishing other environmental KPIs than the emissions for specific countries. So I don't want to make this discussion more complex, but just having one environmental KPI or just having a carbon footprint probably is not taking into account all the other positive or negative impacts that different travelers have. So that's one thing with environmental KPIs. We really had a very hard time in finding from research and desk research social KPIs. And I saw from presentations, very interesting presentations, that whereas in environmental KPIs, we try to estimate a figure or something, the social KPIs are still lagging behind, and it was mentioned yesterday in the opening speech as well. So I think this is something that we need to accelerate, especially academics, especially research institutions, in order for service providers, for brands and for places to have a very clear understanding. I think then the path is upon its community, upon its place, upon its destination. But measuring just the carbon, I feel that we are losing so many other things that sustainability means.
Got it. Yep, got it. So let's turn straight to Maria, because this is, we've seen your wonderful formula. I love this stuff, by the way. I guess that's the academic side. Let's pick up on this, because you look particularly at the carbon footprint. So you've just heard that this is perhaps one of the downside, perhaps. I mean, how about biodiversity data, for example, or anything else actually on the environmental footprint? So that's the first question. Is there plans to include this? The other part is the social component. So you're looking at behavior and consumption. How about the impact on community? I mean, is that something that flows eventually or flows into this? So second question. Third question. And this is a question actually that comes from the audience. Okay, so the first thing, carbon footprint, narrow, right? Carbon tunnel vision. Is that good or not good? Can we use biodiversity and do stuff like that? And then can we use your material, just like the space material this morning, this was one of my questions, to actually have a better idea on how to develop destinations, you know, this predictive analytics. I mean, if we have data, can we not use this, and how is it being used? So here we go. You up for it?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I am. I'll try to stir that on a bit. The first thing is,
yes.
I start with the aim for us is to break it down to regional level. And I think that's kind of the basis. If we do it in a regional level, you are more able to see the effects in a certain region or a certain municipality, and then it's easier to connect that with the social or environmental effects in that particular region or environment. So for me, that kind of is the starting point of our project as well, is to not just have national levels, because it says a lot, but not everything. And if we want to look at the effect it has different effect in the national than it has to certain regions. So we need to look at it, breaking it down, and then continue the work in a wider, broader project to also include social aspect of it, and not just greenhouse gas emission, but also other effects of it. We're talking about the effect it has on the people living there, and it's in a wider process. We're starting somewhere, and it's a developmental phase. We're not saying this is the end game. This is just a starting point. So it's a project that will continue to evolve and to include more. And I mean, I use frameworks. This is the way I come from. So we have a statistical framework that's newly been voted against that has to measure sustainable tourism. It looks at the economic aspect, it looks at the environmental aspect, and it looks at the social aspect. but it also needs to combine all three of them. And I think this is important in the work forward. Coming back to the question about the data that were published, yes, the aim is to publish the data that we are combining or as open data that will be available for everyone to use. And the hope is that it will be accessible for all Nordic countries. So you can do comparable, maybe Northern Sweden isn't the best to compare to southern Sweden. Maybe it's comparing northern Sweden to northern Finland. So we're also looking at region might want to compare data rather than within the same country. And with this project, we're looking at harmonizing the way we are doing statistical works in the entire Nordic region.
Great, thank you so much. Kate, we'll talk about substantiation in a minute because there are actually quite a few questions on that. Yeah, you see that. So we'll come back. We're getting to those questions in a minute. Kate, I wanted to bring out your attention to your report that just published a couple days ago on the annual report that you do on sustainable travel and the intentions and everything. And I'm a little bit surprised. I'm sort of wondering how many years of report. I like that report a lot. And I think a lot of us like it. You survey 30,000 travelers, etc. And it's very interesting. I'm wondering how many years of report do we need telling us that the consumers want to have more sustainable travel, but just don't know how to go about it. I mean, we've had that for quite a few years now. And I'm wondering, I think the onus is on us as an industry to actually bridge that gap. Now, my question is more sort of, do you see, we often talk in academia between the willingness to pay and the actual payment, which is, right, this intention-action gap. Matt actually just mentioned it as well. Is this also something that we capture with that report that we measure, that you can measure? We see people want to travel more sustainably, but they perhaps don't do it or they don't know how to do it. What is the learning here? And also, I think there was one of the answer was people want to travel sustainable, but then when they get to the destinations and they see there is nothing sustainable here, then they feel cheated in some ways, I would imagine. I mean, maybe I twist a little bit the words, but go ahead.
So your first point of the question, how many years do we need this data for before we can actually bridge the gap? Well, this is the 9th year of the report, so I think that
a decade.
We're getting up to the point where maybe we should not do the report anymore until we actually have measurable change in place. But I think what's interesting about it is that I believe it was about 4 years ago, the intention, so travelers saying that they want to travel more sustainably, was about 50%. The next year was 60, the following year 70, 75, and we're at that level now. So the intention is even growing, which is, I don't know how surprising it is based on kind of the world that we're in right now. I think that COVID really actually made some changes, and we've seen consumer interest kind of doubling down on wanting to do things more sustainably. So that's in line with a more general intent. And you're right, I think that everyone is struggling with how to measure the behavior and to prove that there are choices being made based on that. I think that's something that we struggle with at Booking and all of our brands. It's something that I struggled with in my previous role. We did a very strong say-do gap report at Zalando, so European-wide largest fashion retailer. What I found interesting from that report that we're not as clear on in this study that we've been doing at Booking is we investigated the say-do gap at Zalando, and we anticipated, as I think we do now here in this room, we anticipate that customers will say, I don't want to pay more. I don't know enough. I need to be educated. None of those things came through in that study. They specifically, when it was an ethnography, it was quantitative, it was qualitative, and there was not one gap, but there were 12. And I think that is something that we can do as an industry, and we can look at digging into that in a more robust manner that actually says, okay, so. And I think we saw some data from MINDHAUS that was very interesting about I do not want to pay more, etc. I think that that if we are doing unprompted question asking and shop along studies as opposed to kind of what would you do. I think we will actually be able to dig through the data in a way that we will be able to take more aligned and industry-wide action to close that gap.
Right.
And that's what I want to do.
Yes, absolutely. So a take on consumers, which was one Theo, you said that we didn't do enough consumer stuff throughout GSTC. So I'm glad that we're getting this out of our system a little bit. Matt, I'd like to turn to you regarding your relationship now with Euro hotels. I think one of the strategy of EasyJet Holidays is to push for certification. Am I correct?
Correct. Yeah.
What sort of feedback are you getting from your suppliers, from the hotels? So are they happy with this? Are they engaging? What are the challenges in terms of their certification process, but also in terms, is it the measurement? Is it what is it that they face, that they need support, that they need help?
Yeah, so it absolutely is part of our sustainability strategy to drive hotel certification. To the extent that hotel certification is one of our strategic KPIs. So the amount that I get paid at the end of the year is partly determined by our hotel certification journey. That's the level of seriousness with which we take hotel certification. So why do we care? Why is it so important? And when we talk about we talk about certification, we're talking about GSTC recognized certification. And that for us is really important. GSTC seen as the gold standard globally, and therefore hotels that get on our website, it's called Certified Sustainable. Not the sexiest title for labeling, but as we've heard, kind of the time for sexy titles and nice icons is gone, right? It needs to tell customers exactly what it means. So we already have thousands of hotels certified, but it is difficult. And it's not necessarily difficult to engage in the conversation. There's kind of a number of factors that make this difficult. One, and it was on my final slide, was about data quality. So as an industry, we have a challenge when it comes to hotel certifications. And it's great that there's a lot of the key players leaning into this. And there's various different technology solutions that are helping along the journey. But we are some way from being as joined up as we need to be as an industry in terms of hotel certifications. And this is a problem, right? Because you can go to one hotel provider, one accommodation provider or holiday provider website and see a hotel with a label, and go to another one and it not be a label. And you can think, well, has it or has it not? And these can be silly things like the hotel has got a slightly different name, or two words in the hotel's name are the different way round. And you would think, when we hear about AI at virtually every conference we go to, that this would be easy to sort, but it is not. So that's one problem. We have done some work over the last couple of years with friends at the University of Oxford, because one of the things that we wanted to get under the skin of is what are the barriers to certification. So in our hotel portfolio, we have everything from global chains to very small owner-managed properties with 5 or 6 bedrooms. And clearly the appetite, understanding, ability to get on the certification journey is hugely variable within that, particularly when you think about the time that we're in. So when we conducted this research 18 months ago, post-COVID, so if you are a smaller business, particularly owner-managed property, is hotel certification high up on your agenda when you have been fighting to keep your family business for the last 3 generations going? Probably not. However, now is the time where we are having more and more conversations with hotel partners about how we can support them. So we've already done some great work with the GSTC on training, and we funded training across all of our key markets for hoteliers, because one of the pieces of feedback that we got from the research was, this is complicated, we don't quite understand what it is that we're meant to do. So I think there is something about complexity, about certification bodies, accreditation. What's the difference between certification and accreditation? If Randy's in the room, there's a big difference between certification and accreditation. But if you're a hotelier, do you really get some of this? What we get back, this is semantics. You're just being difficult. What's the difference? Well, I've spoken to this organization. Over time, this has become increasingly more and more complex. I just hope that we use this kind of point in time, the juncture that we're at, because of the change in the regulatory environment, to come to a point of consolidation in terminology and the way we do things, the way we talk about things, to make things easier. We are passionate about this. If you run a hotel, this is just one of many other things that you're doing, at the same time as trying to predict how much food you need to order for your meals for the coming week. We need to realize the competing demands that are on our hotel partners and destinations, talk their language, give them all the support they need in order to do the right thing. We have not met one hotel partner that says, don't get it.
Yeah.
Why do they do this? Because if you talk and find the right hook to bring people into the conversation and use other hotel partners in the portfolio as case studies, the cost savings alone of doing the right thing from a sustainability perspective are huge.
Yep.
Start to drop some of these case studies in. It's a very easy conversation to have. Yep. Getting the right outcome is much more tricky.
Yeah, I usually tell students, I say, we could tell the hoteliers the same. Where'd you get your university degree? I got it from a university. What gave the right this university to give you, to certify you with that degree? I don't know, Ministry of Education. That's right, yeah, there's different levels. One is an accredited, the other one is a certifier. So I mean, there's ways for me, anyways, from the education standpoint, sort of make that come through a little bit. Listen, let's pick up on those questions. And Kate, a lot of people are asking this question. There's lots of thumbs up. We have to take it. How was Booking.com sustainable labeling measured, verified over the last 3 years? Why have the Dutch authorities said those labels aren't valid? And perhaps we can link this to the third one you see here, which is what is fact-based labeling and how much? So linked a little bit to that substantiation or rather that verification. Do you want to take that?
Sure. Just to say, for a lot more detail, we have some folks in the room that have been running the program and will be able to answer questions much better than me on some of this. I do want to start with ditto what Matt just said on everything. I mean, I think that there are a lot of points in there that that I would have liked to share myself. So maybe just on the Travel Sustainable program, which was the Travel Sustainable program, excuse me. We cannot no longer call it that. We had 1.4 million properties providing us sustainability efforts that they did. Self-reported, we've done this, etc. So 1.4 million properties, that's fantastic. 700,000 of them, so half of them, were able to meet a threshold that would give them the Travel Sustainable badge. And then, as you might recall, there are 4 levels. So that was sort of the entry level. And that reaches a certain threshold, but it was still self-reported. So the question about verification is still self-reported. We were building a verification program. We were seeking to build that. We did pilots. We started to build out an entire program. Obviously, that will need to shift a little bit now. But this is only 3.5 years or so of a program, so still building. What I want to be very specific about, though, is the Dutch authorities did not have a problem with our methodology. The Dutch authorities were using the Unfair Commercial Practices Directive and the Empowering Consumers for the Green Transition to identify what they consider misleading claims. So they did not weigh in on the methodology of our program. They said that to call this the Travel Sustainable program is misleading consumers to believe that that property is sustainable. We were saying, well, it's more sustainable, it's a process, that's why there's more than one. That doesn't work. And having a badge, they feel, and this is clear in their guidance and in the regulation, that misleads consumers as a stamp of approval. What I find fascinating, and I love, and I really wish that you could tell the European authorities that travelers don't care about certifications or labels. And that's not meant as a disrespect to the group here, but that is what the regulation is directing us towards. We know as operators that there is a process to get there, that you can't go from on or off to on, that we have to help. There's a lot of work to be done in there. And so I think what's just needed is more education of our regulators, please, but also all of us need to be very clear on what those regulations mean, because as Booking.com, you heard our complexity, what we have to deal with on our operational side. But we will not be able to reproduce a claim or a mark or a badge or a certification on our platform that does not abide by those regulations. So everyone needs to understand what they are and whether or not you are in compliance with that, because we will be enforced against, let alone you. So that is a very tricky future here, and consolidation and working together. Those are the things that we really need, because in order to be able to produce really certifiable and fact-based claims, we need to actually have a standardization of language, trustworthy data, verifiable processes, and a way to communicate that to travelers.
So similar to financial data, which we have in place.
That
so
is
we
what
need
it
audit
is
grade,
specifically based on.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Karen, for this question. We got out of the system. For further information on all of this at the break, let's move on to some other questions. And I'd like to pick up on Simone, because we talked a little bit about this, shifting from destination to place development perspective of tourism. What indicators can you use to measure tourism impact on local communities? Maria, Theofilos, do you want to pick on this? You don't have a choice.
I think the statistician among us is the most eligible. So Marian, yes.
Or Matt?
Well, I could. For me, it's going back to, yes, we're hoping that breaking down data on a regional and municipal level will help us to clarify where you need to work with the local communities, and it will be clearer, in my sense, when we look at regional data or municipal data. We can see where tourism are flocking into, and we also hope that it will aid in the local councils' work to maybe have investments in certain areas, because you can see that tourists travel in there and spend a lot of money, and obviously therefore that region or that town, city, municipality will be helped by this data, and it could be a support for them to get extra funding in the local community.
I mean, could we, you want to say something? Could we look at, I don't know, so we look at noise pollution, we look at waste production, we look at displacement of local people. I mean, are there different indicators we could be using? And they are being used. Matt and then Kate. Matt, you had some thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I think an obvious starting point would be, given we're at a GSTC conference, that let's look at the GSTC criteria. What are the requirements that are set out in there, and then what are ways in which there could be measurements? And that's why we see very much kind of our GSTC certification focus with the work with UN Tourism on coming up with a common measurement framework. Those things dovetail together really nicely. The other thing I'd just say is, just because something is a little bit difficult to measure, don't let it stop you doing the right thing. So when we set up our business a few years ago, we made the conscious decision that our in-destination support would be provided by local organisations. That was a big shift compared to a traditional tour operating model in Europe. Do we measure the impact that that has? No, we don't currently. But do we know that it is a better impact on the local economy, on local communities, that we are providing local jobs for people that are passionate about the place that they've grown up? Better for our customers' experience. Much better to be serviced by somebody that's lived on an island for 25, 30, 35 years, that's incredibly passionate about it, that is incidentally going to live there all year round, not bringing people in from the UK to work somewhere for 9 months to pay them and then get them out of there at the end of the summer season. So there's some things that I think, if it feels like it's the right thing to do, get on and do it, even if it's difficult to measure. But if we're looking at what are the things to measure, I think that might seem a little bit tricky, but just go on the GSTC website and look at what are the criteria and what are some measurements that would sit alongside those.
Perfect. Kate?
I again would second what Matt just said about the GSTC criteria. Additionally, I would say, what are the impacts in that area, right? We need to be starting from an impact perspective. What are the negative impacts in the local community that we want to be addressing? And one last thing that I would say about that is that I did see a report from one of our competitors, a very good report that specifically called out that out of every $100 that is spent at a destination, 5 of those dollars stay in the local community. I think that sort of blew my mind when I saw that statistic, in the sense that that is a very that is impactful, and that is a meaningful data point that we need to be addressing, and we need to be supporting in order to improve the situation, that impact does not stay at that level.
Okay, can I stay with you, and can we learn something from another industry? There's a question here that says, if I get it right, you mentioned the fashion industry, you come from this, and you said that some other industry may be a bit ahead. I'm not too sure if the fashion industry is actually necessarily ahead. Perhaps they are, but maybe you tell us, what can we learn from them in terms of data verification, substantiation, anything about that? Is there anything to learn from them?
Yeah. 2 things, and there's probably more, but we are in Stockholm, so we are in the home of H&M, which is one of the world's fast fashion apparel brands and retailers. They're actually a leader in sustainability. I think a lot of people kind of struggle with that as their fast fashion, but they are an absolute leader. What we can learn, and what we can learn from them directly, is H&M, Zalando, Decathlon, which has apparel, Norrøna as a Norwegian brand. These have all had consumer authorities take enforcement action against them on the Unfair Consumer Practices Directive in anticipation of the Green Claims Directive. So you can learn from what you see disappearing. If you want to search a sustainable t-shirt on H&M, you will not be able to do that anymore. You can find a product that is certified organic cotton. You can, so in terms of ahead, they are certainly, the industry is certainly ahead of the game in terms of the regulation enforcement and the actions that they have had to take as an organization in order to meet that. So that is a learning. The second bit is that as an industry, they organized. The apparel industry has created, previously called the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, recently renamed to Cascade, as an industry association specifically coming together to create standard ways of measuring and communicating sustainability of the industry. And we talked in varying degrees about the difficulties that we have, we're complicated, etc. That's the case everywhere, but we need to do it.
Sure. Theofilos, let's pick up on you, because you've seen this as well when you were working with the European Travel Commission. There are a lot of players developing all sorts of calculators right now. It's going everywhere. Do you see that need to have that universal approach to measurement of sustainability in tourism, what we've just said now? Is that something, or is there a danger in this that we put everybody in the same basket, considering this is an industry which is extremely complex, in fact, very diverse? Where do we
Willy,
stand?
I think it's a very interesting question, and I think I'm also concerned. I don't have a very assertive answer, because, for example, on the one hand, when you want a report, you want to be precise, brief, from the private sector perspective, not excessively bureaucratic. So there are some areas that, a universal approach would definitely make sense. On the other hand, we are a very fragmented variety of industries. We have the place, we have different service providers, and also has to do with, let's say, different sizes. So Matt mentioned the very small family businesses. And there are countries and destinations that a very large percentage of the tourism offering is done by family businesses. So I'm not sure. I think this is something that we haven't been there. There is no assertive answer. I think both directions have their positive and negatives. I think from a destination perspective, to have like a universal understanding of the minimum requirements, of the minimum KPIs that each place, each destination monitors, would definitely make sense. From a service provider perspective, over a certain size, this would also make sense.
Okay.
But because we're such a fragmented business and industry, I think we will see this discussion going on in the future as well.
Very good. This is a call to the organizers here at GSTCs. There are so many questions and they're all so good. I could see at least 15 different theses here to be written. Are we collecting those questions and gathering all of them? We are, thumbs up. This is so, I mean, it's so powerful because they need to be answered and we just don't have the time. Final round of question for you. If you have, I don't know if you've prepared this, I've sort of asked you to do this, but if you have one short sentence for our audience on the topic of measurement, evaluation, performance in sustainable tourism, what would that sentence be? Did you think about this, Kate? I'm putting you on the spot. If you say, no, I haven't thought about that, then we move on.
I will answer it happily.
Yeah.
Please read the regulations, understand what your organization needs to do to be compliant, and work with all of us as a joint industry to drive the change we want.
Thank you very much, Maria.
No, I haven't answered. Good answer for that question.
That's all right, Theo?
Select a couple of KPIs through all the 4 pillars of sustainability and go ahead with them, instead of focusing in just one pillar.
Very good. Matt?
I just think we can transform travel for everyone if we come together, educate ourselves, educate each other, collaborate, but let's just get on with trying to do things a little bit differently.
Got it. And 3 key takeaway for you to go with at your break and talk to all of those. You've mentioned this industry is a power for good. We could, should, and must do more. I'm picking up on your words because you said that. That is, this industry should lead because the alternative is being led. And that's scary. I think we're seeing this, right? So that's the second takeaway, perhaps. And the third is that idea, that thing with substantiation of data. Let's just harness this. It's going to be super important. Verification, substantiation. I'd like to thank our speakers. It's been great. Thanks very much, and have a good break, everyone. Thank you. I think we're off for a coffee break. Am I correct? Yes. Should we take a picture?